I always believed 55 would be the year my life finally settled into a peaceful rhythm. After spending decades working double shifts to fund every single milestone for my son, I expected nothing more than basic respect. Instead, I discovered that while my savings had paid for their dream family cruise, I was the only one left standing on the shore. It was a brutal reminder that loyalty is expensive, but betrayal is free. My name is Eleanor Briggs, and for the last 10 years, my world has been defined by two things: my job at the Shoreline Compliance Bureau and my son, Landon. At 55, I had become an expert at finding comfort in the routine grey of the Willowford coast. I spent my days auditing safety regulations and my evenings volunteering at the local food bank, convincing myself that a life of service was a fair trade for a life of solitude. Since my husband passed away, I had poured every ounce of my energy and nearly every dollar of my savings into ensuring Landon never felt the weight of our loss. Landon is 32 now. He used to be the kind of boy who would drive across town just to fix my leaky faucet without being asked. But that version of my son seemed to fade the moment he placed a ring on Marissa's finger. It was not an abrupt change, but rather a slow erosion. I found myself being pushed to the periphery of their lives, invited to dinner only when they needed a babysitter for their dog or a co-signer for a loan. I learned to swallow my pride, telling myself that mothers often fade into the background when their children build new empires. Marissa was a master of exclusion, wrapped in polite smiles. She never explicitly told me I was unwanted. Instead, she would speak in code. She would talk about events that were for younger crowds, or dinners that were just a quick thing, leaving me holding a casserole dish in my hallway, feeling foolish. I took it all. I took it because Landon was my only link to the past I cherished, and I was terrified of severing that tether. The unease started on a Tuesday evening. The Willowford air was heavy with humidity, the kind that sticks to your skin and warns of an approaching storm. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was Landon. "Mom? Do you have a minute?" His voice sounded thin, stretched tight over some hidden anxiety. "Of course. Landon. I am just finishing up dishes. Is everything all right with you and Marissa?" Yeah. Everything is fine." "Great, actually," he said, though the pause before his words suggested otherwise. "We have been talking about the summer, about doing something big as a family. You know, a real break." My heart gave a small, pathetic flutter of hope. I gripped the edge of the granite counter. I had helped them with the down payment on their house last year. I had paid off Landon's student loans. Perhaps, I thought foolishly, they finally wanted to celebrate our family as a whole unit. That sounds wonderful, honey. A family trip sounds lovely, I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "Right, well, we are finalizing the details. It is going to be special. Marissa has been planning it for months. We wanted to make sure everything was locked in before we made the big announcement. I am so glad you called to tell me." I replied, "Yeah. Well, I just wanted to give you a heads up that we are going to be busy prepping. I might not be able to come over for dinner this Sunday." There was a silence on the line that felt heavy, loaded with words he was too cowardly to speak. "Landon. Is there something else?" No. Just, it is going to be a chaotic week. I will talk to you soon. Mom." The line went dead before I could say goodbye. I stood there in the dim light of my kitchen, the silence of the house suddenly deafening. I felt a strange vibration in my chest, an instinct honed by years of reading people at the bureau. It felt like I was standing on a cliff edge, staring down into a fog, knowing the ground beneath my feet was crumbling, but unable to move. I did not know it then, but the storm had already made landfall. It was only a matter of time before I saw the wreckage. I sat down at my laptop to check my emails, trying to distract myself, when a notification from social media popped up on my screen. It was a tagged photo of my niece, smiling wide, holding a brochure that would shatter my entire world. The photograph on my screen was bright, colourful, and sharp enough to slice right through my chest. It was posted by Marissa's niece, a girl I had met perhaps twice, and the caption read, "Family vacation countdown 20 days until we hit the Caribbean." I sat frozen at my kitchen table, my coffee growing cold in the mug. I swiped through the carousel of images. There was a photo of the tickets. There was a screenshot of the guest list for a private dinner reservation. I saw the names clearly. Marissa, Landon, Marissa's sister, her parents, her cousin from Ohio. Even her best friend appeared to be included. I scanned the list again, my finger trembling against the glass. I checked the comments. I checked the tags. My name was nowhere. I was the ghost in the machine, the invisible woman who had birthed the man paying for half of this trip. The denial was a thick, suffocating blanket. I told myself it must be a mistake. Perhaps they were planning to surprise me. Perhaps my ticket was a separate gift. But the reality arrived the next morning in the form of my neighbour, Brenda, who leaned over the fence while I was watering my hydrangeas. "I saw Landon at the mall yesterday with Marissa's folks," Brenda said, leaning on her rake. "They were loading a mountain of new luggage into the car. Samsonite looked like. You must be thrilled about the trip. I bet you are busy packing." "Huh?" I gripped the garden hose until my knuckles turned white. I am not sure what the final plan is yet. Brenda paused, her smile faltering into a look of pity that felt like a slap. "Oh, I see. Well, have a good day. Eleanor?" She knew. The whole town probably knew. I went inside, washed the dirt off my hands, and dialed Landon's number. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of fear and anger. He answered on the third ring, his voice sounding distracted. "Hey, Mom. I am actually in the middle of something right now. Are you going on a cruise?" "Landon," I asked, cutting him off. My voice was steady, but my knees were shaking. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing, the sound of a coward trying to formulate a lie and failing. "How did? Who told you? Does it matter?" I asked. "I saw the photos. Marissa's entire family is going. Her friends are going. Why am I the only one who does not know about this, Mom?" "Listen. Do not make this a big thing," Landon said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. We thought it would be better this way. Better to exclude your mother. I spent every Christmas, every Thanksgiving making sure you had a home." "Landon, why am I excluded?" "Because, well, you do not really fit into these kinds of trips." He stammered. "It is a party cruise. Mom, late nights, drinking, lots of walking. You know how you get tired. We did not want you to feel out of place." "Out of place," I repeated, the hurt blooming in my chest like ink in water. "I am 55, Landon, not 90. I can walk. I can enjoy a dinner." Then I heard the rustle of the phone being snatched away. Marissa's voice cut through the line, sharp and cold. "Eleanor, look, Let's be real, she said. You do not fit the vibe of the group. My family is loud. We are going to be wild. And frankly, having you there would make everyone feel like they have to behave. We want a vacation, not a guilt trip. It is nothing personal. It is just about the dynamic. I stood there, clutching the phone, unable to breathe. The vibe. My presence was an inconvenience to their aesthetic. Landon came back on the line, his voice sounding defensive now, emboldened by his wife. Plus, Mum, travel is expensive. We had to prioritize. Expensive, I whispered. Landon, I gave you $10,000 last month. I told you it was for the house repairs. Yeah, and we really appreciate that, Landon said, and the casual cruelty in his tone shattered me. That money actually covered the deposit for the suite and the drink packages. So, in a way, you are helping us make this happen. You should feel good about that. The room spun. They had taken the savings I had scraped together from overtime shifts, money I gave him thinking his roof was leaking, and used it to pay for a vacation I was explicitly banned from. I see, I said. My voice sounded strange, hollow, as if it were coming from someone else. I knew you would understand, Landon said, relief flooding his voice. We will bring you back a souvenir. Promise. I lowered the phone without saying goodbye. I stood in the center of my living room, the silence pressing in on my ears. The tears did not come. The sobbing did not come. Instead, a cold, hard knot tightened in my stomach. It replaced the love that had lived there for 32 years. I looked at the family photos on the mantelpiece, at the smiling boy who was no longer there. He thought I was weak. He thought I would just sit here and wait for my souvenir. I walked over to the window and watched the sun dip below the horizon. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a clarity I had not felt in years. I was not just a mother anymore. I was a woman who had been robbed, and I was done being the victim. That night, the silence in my house was not peaceful. It was heavy, filled with the ghosts of the last 20 years. I sat at my kitchen table with a box of old financial records, the paper turning yellow with age. I ran my fingers over the ledgers from the years immediately following my husband's death. I remembered the smell of the diner where I picked up evening shifts after a full day at the bureau. I remembered the ache in my lower back that became my constant companion, a physical reminder of the price I was paying to keep Landon's world spinning. I looked at the entry for his first semester of college. I had worn the same winter coat for 6 years so that I could write that check without him taking a student loan. I looked at the withdrawal for his first car, a reliable sedan that I bought so he would be safe driving to his internship. I had cancelled my own dental surgery that year to afford it. Every line on those pages was a testament to a love that gave until it bled. And what had it purchased? A son who viewed my generosity not as a gift, but as a natural resource, something to be mined until it was empty. It was a bitter pill to swallow. But I realized this was not entirely his fault. I had created this monster by shielding him from every financial storm. I had denied him the ability to weather them. I had taught him that money appeared when he needed it and that his mother was an infinite well. But wells run dry. My hand reached for a notepad. I needed to scream, but the house was too empty for noise. Instead, I wrote. I wrote a letter to Landon that I knew I would never send. I poured out the humiliation of seeing those photos. I wrote about the $10,000 he had stolen under false pretenses. I wrote about the pain of being told I did not fit the vibe of a family I had built with my own sweat. The ink smeared in places where my hand shook. But by the time I finished, the tears had stopped. I folded the letter and placed it in the shredder. Watching the paper turn into confetti felt like the first step in severing the cord. The next day at the Shoreline Compliance Bureau, I sat in the break room with Margaret, a senior auditor who had been my desk neighbour for 15 years. She saw the dark circles under my eyes and the way my hands trembled around my coffee mug. "Eleanor, you look like you have gone 12 rounds with a heavyweight boxer," Margaret said, her voice soft but direct. "What is going on?" I told her everything. I told her about the cruise, the exclusion, and the $10,000. I expected her to offer sympathy, to pat my hand and tell me kids can be thoughtless. Instead, Margaret set her mug down with a sharp clack. "Eleanor, stop making excuses for him," she said firmly. "You raised a son, not a prince. But right now, he is acting like a king who thinks his subjects exist to serve him. You know what we do here when a company fails compliance. We fine them. We shut them down. We make them feel the consequences. I cannot just cut him off. Margaret, he is my son," I said, feeling the old guilt rising. "He is 32 years old," Margaret countered. "He is a grown man who just stole your retirement money to take his in-laws on a luxury boat. Eleanor, listen to me. Sometimes you have to let your children hit the wall. If you keep cushioning the blow, he will never learn how to stand up." Her words settled over me like a heavy coat. She was right. For decades, I had been the cushion. I had absorbed every impact so Landon wouldn't have to bruise. But he wasn't a child anymore. He was a man who had made a cruel, calculated choice. I drove home that evening with a new clarity. I did not want to hurt Landon. I did not want to ruin his life or destroy his marriage. Those were the actions of a petty person, and I refused to be petty. But I did want to teach him. I wanted him to understand the weight of the dollar he spent so freely. I wanted him to feel the cold wind that blows when the safety net is gone. I sat down at my computer and logged into my banking portal. I looked at the joint accounts, the shared access points, the years of financial entanglement that I had maintained for his convenience. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg for an invitation. I was simply going to remove my support beams from the structure of his life and let gravity do the rest. A plan began to form in my mind, cold and logical. If I did not fit the vibe of their luxury lifestyle, then surely my money did not fit there either. The investigation began on my dining room table. Once I started looking, the tangled web of Landon's financial dependency was far worse than I had imagined. I discovered that Landon still used my address in Willowford as his primary residence on his tax returns to qualify for a substantial district tax credit. Despite having lived in the city with Marissa for 3 years, he was cheating the system, and he was using my home to do it. But that was a minor infraction compared to the email I found in my spam folder. It was a notification from a private lending firm thanking me for my application. I clicked it open, my breath catching in my throat. Landon was applying for a personal loan of $15,000, and he had listed me as the co-signer without my consent. He had assumed, with the arrogance of a spoiled child, that I would simply sign whatever document he shoved in front of me later. Then came the final blow. I found a piece of mail I had set aside earlier in the week, thinking it was junk. It was a welcome letter from a major credit card company. "Congratulations on your new Platinum Voyager card." It read, I had never applied for such a card. I scanned the document and saw that while the primary account holder was listed as Eleanor Briggs, the authorized user card had been issued to Marissa. She had used my excellent credit score to open a high-limit card, likely to harvest the sign-up bonus points for their cruise upgrades. They were financing the very trip I was excluded from by using my financial identity. I gathered every scrap of paper and drove to the centre of town. Maeve Hollister was known in Willowford as a lawyer who did not lose. She was a woman of sharp angles and even sharper intellect. I sat in her office and laid the evidence out on her mahogany desk. Maeve adjusted her glasses and read through the files in silence. "Eleanor, do you realize what this is?" Maeve asked, looking over the rim of her spectacles. "This is not just bad behavior. This is fraud. Marissa committed identity theft when she opened this card. I do not want to send them to jail. Maeve, I want to be free of this," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Then we sever the limb to save the body," Maeve said, leaning forward. "You need to execute a total financial separation, immediately. We freeze your credit. We close these unauthorized accounts. And we remove your name from any joint ventures. If he drowns, he drowns. Do it," I said. I spent the next 4 hours making phone calls under Maeve's supervision. I reported the credit card as fraudulent, which immediately locked the account. I went to our local bank branch and removed myself from the joint checking account Landon had used since college. I froze the emergency sub-account that I recently discovered Landon had been dipping into for his daily expenses. By the time I walked out of the bank, the sun was setting, and I felt lighter than I had in years. When I got home, my laptop pinged with a new notification. It was an email from the cruise line. Landon, in his haste, or perhaps out of sheer habit, had auto-filled my email address into the billing contact field for the reservation. Urgent final payment declined. I opened the message. It stated that the credit card on file, the one Marissa had opened in my name, had been declined. The transaction for the remaining balance of $6,000 had failed. The email warned that if payment was not received within 24 hours, the entire booking, including the non-refundable deposits, would be forfeited. I stared at the screen. I held their dream vacation in the palm of my hand. All I had to do was nothing. I sat back in my chair and watched the cursor blink. This was not just an error message, it was ammunition. The realization hit me while I was reviewing the digital trail of my tax returns. Landon had not just borrowed my credit, he had built his entire financial house of cards on the assumption that my tax refund was his to claim. He had filed our returns in a way that linked his projected deductions to my household income, creating a calculated refund of nearly $4,000. That money was not just a bonus to him. It was the lifeline he needed to cover the final payment for the cruise. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply printed out the change of status form and the affidavit of financial separation from the Tax Bureau's website. With a calm hand, I filled in the details, explicitly removing Landon as a dependent or associated party on any of my filings. I scanned the documents and uploaded them directly to the state portal, marking them as urgent. The system processed the request instantly. The pending refund that Landon was watching like a hawk was immediately flagged for review and frozen. The reaction was almost instantaneous. My phone lit up on the kitchen counter just as I was pouring my evening tea. It was Landon. Mom. Pick up. Something is really wrong. His voice cracked through the speaker the moment I swiped the green button. He sounded breathless, like he had just run a mile. "Hello. Landon. What is the matter? I asked, keeping my voice level. The account. The tax portal says the funds they are frozen. It says there is a hold due to an amendment. I need that money to clear tomorrow morning or we lose the booking. I took a sip of my tea. It tasted exceptionally sweet. I know, I said softly. I filed the amendment. There was a silence on the other end so profound I could hear the static on the line. You. What, why, Mom? Do you have any idea what you have done? I have separated my finances from yours. Landon. I am no longer claiming you, and you can no longer claim my assets as your own. But the deadline is in 48 hours. If that money does not drop, we lose everything. The flights, the hotel, the deposit. Mum, you cannot do this to me. To you, I asked, my voice hardening. You stole my identity to book a trip I am not allowed to go on. From now on, you are responsible for your own decisions. Mum, please, do not hang up, Mom. I ended the call and placed the phone face down. 5 minutes later, it buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Marissa. I opened it, bracing myself. It was a long, rambling paragraph filled with venom. She accused me of being bitter, jealous, and toxic. She wrote that I was trying to sabotage their happiness because I was lonely. You are ruining this for everyone just because you cannot handle being left out. The message read. I did not reply. Instead, I took a screenshot of the message and saved it to a folder labeled Evidence. If they escalated this to harassment, I wanted a paper trail. Landon called again and again, 7 times in 20 minutes. I let it ring. The silence in my house was no longer empty. It felt protective. Then, a number I did not recognize flashed on the screen. It was an area code from Ohio. My instinct told me exactly who it was. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Is this Eleanor? A woman's voice asked. It sounded strained. It was Sharon, Marissa's mother. Yes, this is Eleanor. Eleanor, hi. Look, this is awkward, but Landon just called us in a panic. He is saying something about a bank error. We have already paid our share for the flights, but he was supposed to cover the main cabin block with family funds. If he defaults, we all lose our reservations. Surely we can work this out. She sounded terrified. She wasn't calling to check on me. She was calling because her free ride was about to crash. I am sorry, Sharon, I said, cutting her off before she could beg. But that is between you and Landon. But Eleanor, we are family. We are supposed to be doing this together. I let out a dry, short laugh. I was excluded from this trip. Sharon, do not drag me into your mess. I hung up the phone and turned it off completely. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one fixing the disaster. I was the one watching it happen. The notification from the cruise line arrived like a verdict. It was a stark, automated email sent to the contact address on file, which was still mine. The subject line read in bold red letters, Final Notice Reservation, subject to cancellation in 48 hours. It was the kind of countdown that usually induces panic. But as I sat in my quiet living room, I felt a strange, detached calm. I was watching a demolition, but I was no longer inside the building. The chaos did not stay contained in my inbox. Years ago, Landon had created a massive email thread called Briggs Family Updates to share photos and news. He must have used that same contact list to coordinate the trip logistics, forgetting that my old email address was still embedded in the chain as a silent observer. Suddenly, my laptop began to ping relentlessly as the reply all function became a weapon. The first message was from Sharon, Marissa's mother. Landon. Why is the travel agent calling us? He says the master suite is unpaid. We already transferred our share for the flights. If this gets cancelled, we lose everything. Then came a reply from Marissa's brother. Dude, fix this. I took time off work for this. I watched the digital panic unfold in real time. They were turning on each other. The veneer of the happy, cohesive family unit was cracking under the pressure of a few $1,000s. That was when Marissa decided to pour gasoline on the fire. She sent a long, frantic message to the group, clearly trying to salvage her reputation. Guys, calm down. It is just Eleanor being difficult. You know how she gets. She is getting to that age where she does not understand how things work. She is confused and vindictive because she is lonely. Do not worry. We will handle her. I stared at the words. Confused. Vindictive. After everything I had sacrificed. This was how she painted me to her family. But her attempt to deflect backfired. A reply came through from Derek, Marissa's cousin, who I had always known to be a decent man. Wait a second. You told us Eleanor volunteered to pay but could not come because of her health. Now you are saying she is vindictive. Did she even know about this trip? Because if you guys expected her to pay for a vacation, she was not invited to. That is low. Even for you. The thread went silent. The truth was out. They weren't just angry about the money. They were embarrassed. They had been exposed as moochers who were happy to spend my money as long as they didn't have to look at my face. My phone rang moments later. It was Landon. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Mum. Mum. Are you there? His voice was trembling. Stripped of all the arrogance he had shown me just days ago, I am here. Landon, I said. You have to help me, please. It is a disaster. Marissa's dad is threatening to sue me for the flight costs if the cruise gets cancelled. Marissa is locking herself in the bathroom. Mom, I am begging you, just this once. Release the hold on the funds. I will pay you back. I swear. I listened to his breathing, ragged and terrified. He sounded like the little boy who used to scrape his knees and run to me for a bandage. But he wasn't a little boy. He was a man who had made a choice to discard me. You want me to pay for the privilege of being excluded? I asked. No. It is not like that. It is just... We are in too deep. Please, Mum, do it for the family. The family, I repeated the word, tasting the bitterness of it. Landon, tell me the truth. When you were booking the tickets, when you were laughing with them and picking out excursions, did you ever think of my feelings just once? Did you pause for even 1 second to think about how this would break my heart? The line went dead silent. I waited. I waited for an apology. I waited for a lie. I waited for anything that would show he understood the magnitude of his betrayal. But there was only the sound of his breathing. He couldn't answer because the answer was no. He hadn't thought of me at all until he needed my wallet. That is what I thought. I whispered. Mum? Wait. Goodbye. Landon. I pressed the red button and ended the call. I placed the phone on the table and felt a hot tear track down my cheek. Then another. I sat there and wept. But the tears were not for the trip. They were not for the money. I was crying because for the first time in 32 years, I had chosen myself over him. It hurt like surgery, sharp and deep, but I knew that the wound was finally clean. I had taken my dignity back, and it was worth every cent. The envelope looked innocent enough, nestled between a grocery circular and a utility bill. It was thick, creamy paper with a gold lining, the kind banks send to their most valued customers. I opened it with a letter opener, expecting a generic offer. Instead, I pulled out a statement for a credit line I had never opened. My eyes scanned the transaction history, and the air left my lungs. Luxury Caribbean excursion package, $800. Private beach cabana rental, $450. Champagne, welcome kit, $200. The total balance was nearly $4,000. This was not just a case of Landon borrowing a little cash to bridge a gap. This was systemic usage. They had not just excluded me from the trip. They were actively using my credit rating to upgrade their experience to a level of luxury they could not afford on their own. They were drinking champagne on my dime while telling me I wasn't good enough to sit at their table. I called Maeve immediately. They are not just leaning on me. Maeve, they are standing on my neck, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. Eleanor, this changes things from a civil dispute to something much uglier, Maeve replied, her tone sharp and professional. You need to stop protecting him. If you do not report this as fraud, the bank will hold you liable for this debt. You have to make a choice. Is his credit score worth $4,000 of your retirement? No, I said firmly. It is not. I spent the next hour on the phone with the fraud department. I verified my identity. I stated clearly that I had not authorized these charges and had not opened the account. The representative was sympathetic but efficient. We will close the account immediately. Mrs. Briggs. Any pending authorizations will be declined effective this second. Thank you, I said. The consequences were faster than I expected. That evening, Landon and Marissa were scheduled to check into a high-end hotel near the port, a pre-cruise stay they had bragged about on social media. At 7 p.m, my phone began to buzz. It was Marissa. I did not answer. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately, then a third time. Finally, I picked up, but I did not speak. I simply pressed the record button on my screen. You petty, vindictive old woman. Marissa's voice was a shriek, distorted by bad reception and pure fury. Do you know what you just did? We are at the front desk. They just cut up the card. They humiliated us in front of the whole lobby. How could you? You are supposed to be a mother. I am a mother, I said calmly. I am just not your banker anymore. We are stranded here. We cannot check in. You need to call the bank right now and tell them it was a mistake. Fix this. Eleanor. Or I swear to God. You swear what? Marissa, I asked. You are threatening the victim of your identity theft. I am recording this call. I suggest you watch your tone. There was a gasp, followed by a click. She had hung up. 30 minutes later, the phone rang again. I braced myself for another assault, but the ID showed a different number. It was Derek, Marissa's cousin. Hello? Derek, I said, keeping my guard up. Mrs. Briggs. Eleanor. Derek sounded tired and embarrassed. Look, I just wanted to call and say, I am sorry. Marissa is screaming in the lobby, but I just found out what they actually did with the credit cards. I had no idea they were using your name. I thought they had saved up for this. They did not save anything. Derek. They spent my savings. I know. and that is wrong. I just wanted you to know that not everyone here agrees with them. I am going to find my own hotel tonight. I am really sorry you are going through this. Thank you. Derek. That means a lot. I ended the call and walked to my window. The streetlights of Willowford were flickering on, casting long shadows across my lawn. For years, I had felt small in my own family, shrinking myself to fit into the corners of their lives. But tonight, standing in my quiet house, I felt tall. I wasn't the pathetic widow waiting for a phone call. I was the one pulling the strings, and the puppets were finally dancing to the truth. My computer chimed with a new email. I walked over and sat down. It was the final confirmation from the cruise line. Subject reservation cancellation, confirmation 88392. Dear customer, due to the failure to secure payment on the primary account, your booking has been cancelled in full. All reserved cabins have been released back into the inventory. I read the words twice. The trip was gone. The luxury suite, the private cabana, the champagne, it had all evaporated because the foundation it was built on had finally walked away. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long, slow breath. I did not feel malicious joy. I did not feel the urge to gloat. I felt a profound sense of relief. I smiled, a small, genuine curve of my lips. I had not destroyed them. I had simply stepped out of the way and let gravity do its work. And the best part was that I was only just getting started. The pounding on my front door started at 7 in the morning. It was aggressive, rhythmic, and familiar. I tied my robe tighter and walked to the front hallway, but I did not unlock the deadbolt. Through the frosted glass, I could see the outline of my son, pacing like a caged animal. When I opened the door, Landon looked disheveled. His eyes were red, likely from a lack of sleep and an excess of arguing with Marissa. He did not ask how I was. He did not apologize. He simply pointed a shaking finger at me. You think this is funny?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "We are the laughing stock of the whole family. Marissa's dad had to drive everyone home. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? You are not acting like a mother. You are acting like an enemy." I stood in the doorway, feeling the morning chill on my ankles. A week ago, his anger would have made me crumble. I would have rushed to fix it, to soothe him, to write a check just to make the yelling stop. But today, I looked at him and saw a stranger. I am acting like a person who demands respect. "Landon," I said quietly. "Respect, you stranded us. You cut off the cards. That is not respect. That is abuse." "Abuse," I repeated, my voice rising just a fraction. "Abuse is stealing my identity. Abuse is lying to my face for months. Abuse is using me to fund a life you cannot afford while treating me like I do not exist." He stepped forward, putting his foot on the threshold. "I am not leaving until you fix this. You are going to call the bank and tell them it was a mistake." I looked him dead in the eye. "Landon, get off my porch." "No. You listen to me. If you do not leave my property in the next 30 seconds, I am calling the police," I said. The words tasted cold and metallic, but they came out steady. Landon froze. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at me as if I had grown a second head. He had never heard a threat from me in his entire life, and the reality of it seemed to short-circuit his rage. He stepped back, stumbling slightly on the stairs. "You are crazy," he muttered. "You are actually crazy. You are destroying this family. I did not destroy it. Landon, I replied. I just stopped holding it together all by myself. He stormed off to his car, peeling out of the driveway with a screech of tires that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. I watched him go, then locked the door. My hands were not shaking. I went straight to my home office. I fired up the printer and began to organize the evidence. I printed 2 full copies of every fraudulent credit card application, every tax document, and every unauthorized withdrawal. I placed them in crisp manila folders. Later that morning, I met with Maeve. She slid a document across the desk, titled Petition for Permanent Financial Severance. It was a legal declaration that I would never again be liable for his debts, regardless of familial status. This is the final wall. Eleanor, Maeve said softly. Once you sign this, he is on his own, legally and financially, forever. I picked up the pen. Where do I sign? By the afternoon. The story had circulated through Willowford. Small towns run on gossip, and for once, the current was flowing in my favour. Brenda from next door brought over a casserole. The cashier at the grocery store gave me a knowing nod and a discount on my produce. They knew. They knew what Landon had done, and the shame he tried to cast on me was now clinging to him, like a second skin. Marissa tried to post a status online about toxic in-laws, but the comments were so scathing she had to delete her account within an hour. They were powerless. Without my money, they had no leverage. Without my silence, they had no protection. I sat on my porch that evening, watching the sun go down. The air felt cleaner. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for years was gone. I took a sip of iced tea and whispered the words I had said to him earlier, just to feel their weight one more time. Son, I have had enough. It was not a statement of anger anymore. It was a declaration of freedom. I was 55 years old, and my life was finally my own. The knock on my door 3 days later was not the aggressive pounding of an entitled son. It was a weak, hesitant sound, barely audible over the hum of my refrigerator. When I opened the door, I found Landon standing there. But he looked nothing like the man who had screamed at me on the porch. He looked pale, hollowed out, and terrified. He was holding a crumpled letter in his hand, the logo of the state tax authority visible even from where I stood. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. I think I am going to jail." I stepped back to let him in. I did not offer him tea. I did not offer him a hug. I pointed to the chair opposite me at the kitchen table. He sat down heavily, dropping the letter onto the wood. It was a formal notice of an audit investigation regarding fraudulent dependent claims and suspicious income verification. The state had flagged his return the moment I filed my separation paperwork. Because he had submitted his return, claiming me as a financial dependent to boost his refund, and I had submitted a sworn affidavit stating I was financially independent. The system had caught him in a lie. And the tax bureau does not treat lies as mistakes. They treat them as crimes. I looked around the room, expecting to see Marissa storming in behind him to defend her husband. The hallway was empty. The driveway was empty. "Where is your wife?" "Landon," I asked quietly. Landon put his head in his hands. She went to stay with her parents. She said she could not handle the stress. She said I tricked her into thinking we had money. I almost laughed, but the sadness in the room was too thick. Marissa, the woman who had happily spent every dime he stole, had abandoned ship the moment the water started rising. She had left him to face the wreck alone. "So you are here because you have nowhere else to go?" I said. It was not a question. I did not mean for it to get this bad. Landon sobbed, his shoulders shaking. I just wanted a perfect vacation. Marissa's family. They always look at me like I am not good enough. Like I am just some guy who got lucky marrying her. I wanted to show them I could provide. I wanted to be the big man for once. I thought if I could just pull off this trip, they would finally respect me. I listened to him, and for a moment, my heart ached. I saw the insecure little boy hiding inside the 32-year-old man. He had destroyed his relationship with me not out of malice, but out of a desperate, pathetic need for validation from people who did not care about him. But then I looked at the tax letter. I looked at the lines on his face that were not there a month ago. Pity would not fix this. Pity had caused this. "Landon, look at me," I said. He lifted his tear-stained face. "You excluded me from the trip because I was an embarrassment to you," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You stole my money and my identity to impress people who left you the second the check bounced. And now that the consequences are here, you want the mother you rejected to save you. Can you see how unreasonable that is?" Landon opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He closed it again. The silence stretched between us, heavy and absolute. He realized, finally, that the old Eleanor, the one who would have already been on the phone with a lawyer, writing checks, fixing everything, was gone. I stood up and walked over to the counter where I kept my purse. I pulled out a small, white card. It was Maeve Hollister's business card. I slid it across the table until it rested next to his trembling hand. "I am not going to pay your back taxes, Landon. And I am not going to lie to the agents for you," I said. "But I will give you this. Maeve is the best lawyer in the county. She knows we have separated our finances, but she might agree to represent you if you tell her the truth. The whole truth. You aren't going to help me?" Landon asked, his voice small. "I am helping you," I replied. "I am letting you handle this. If you want to fix your life, you have to start by taking responsibility for breaking it." I watched him stare at the card. This was the pivot point. I wasn't getting revenge anymore. Revenge is for the wounded. I was no longer wounded. I was healing. I was teaching him the one lesson I had neglected for 3 decades, that actions have weight, and no one, not even a mother, can carry that weight for you forever. The next 6 months were the hardest of Landon's life, but they were also the most necessary. Without my checkbook to shield him, he was forced to stand naked before the cold reality of the law. Maeve helped him avoid jail time, negotiating a strict repayment plan with the tax authorities that garnished his wages and monitored his spending. He had to sell the luxury car I had helped him buy years ago to pay off the penalties. He took a second job working evenings at a warehouse, the kind of manual labor he used to scoff at. For the first time in 32 years, my son was not a prince. He was a man paying his debts. He did not come to see me for a long time, and I did not chase him. I tended to my garden. I volunteered at the bureau. I rebuilt the peace that they had stolen from me. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, when the autumn leaves were turning gold, a battered sedan pulled into my driveway. Landon got out. He looked thinner. There were grey hairs at his temples that hadn't been there before. He walked to the door, not with the stride of an entitled child, but with the heaviness of someone who has carried a burden. He sat at my kitchen table, keeping his hands folded in his lap. He did not ask for coffee. He did not ask for a loan. "Mum," he started, his voice rough. I do not know where to start." "Start with the truth," I said. He took a deep breath. "I used you. For years. I did not see you as my mother. I saw you as a safety net, a financial plan. I thought your job was to fix my mistakes so I could pretend to be someone I am not. And when you stopped fixing them, I hated you for it. But these last few months, waking up at 4 in the morning, working until my hands bleed, I realized something. You did this for me for 20 years, and I never said thank you." I looked at him. I wanted to reach out and hug him, to tell him it was all forgotten. But I stayed seated. Forgiveness is not about erasing the past. It is about building a future that does not repeat it. "I am glad you finally understand, Landon," I said softly. "I am sorry, Mom. Not because I got caught, but because I hurt the only person who was actually in my corner." He left an hour later. We did not fix everything that day, but the foundation was laid. It was not built on money anymore. It was built on respect. A week later, I checked my mailbox. Inside was a handmade card, covered in glitter and crooked crayon drawings. It was from my granddaughter, Maya, Landon's 5-year-old daughter. I opened it, and the message inside, written in a child's shaky block letters, read, "Grandma, Daddy says he made a mistake. He says we miss you. Will you come on a boat with us next time? Please." I felt a lump form in my throat. Landon had not lied to his daughter. He hadn't told her I was busy or sick. He had told her the truth, that he had made a mistake. He was owning his failure even to his child. I took a pen and a sheet of my best stationery. I did not write a check. I wrote a note back to my son. "I will go, but this time, you are the one inviting me. You will pay for your ticket, and I will pay for mine. And you must ask me because you want your mother there, not because you need her wallet. When you can do that with a sincere heart, I will be packing my bags." I sealed the envelope and walked to the post office with a smile on my face. I had not won this battle by destroying my son. I had won by forcing him to become the man I always knew he could be. I had reclaimed my dignity, and in doing so, I had finally given him the chance to earn his own. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below, sharing your location and your thoughts on how I handled this situation. Did I go too far, or was it just right? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Grandma's Family Diary channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people who might need to hear it.